it was one of the best things that I've ever done in my life, but it came from one of the worst experiences and lowest times of my life, having to be the full-time caregiver for my mom as she was passing of brain cancer. It kind of makes you starkly aware of the choices that you're making in life. And it makes you very, very acutely aware that, your time on earth is very finite, and what you do with it matters, and who you spend it with matters, and all of these things. And it definitely created an awareness of that for me. And it really readjusted my perspective on a lot of things, including what am I doing with my life? Where am I finding fulfillment and value? How do I want to show up, provide, do all these other things? And is what I'm doing now really the best for me?
Hey, everybody. I'm here with Northern Colorado entrepreneur Justin Vetters, and he's going to share some personal background about his business journey, his bodybuilding journey, and the things that he's doing to make the world a better place. Hey, thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Would you make sure to please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel here, and please share this episode with somebody whose life it will make better. Justin Vetters, welcome to the show.
Matt, thank you.
We're a little red faced because we were drinking coffee and we were laughing inappropriately before the show started.
Yeah, joking, having a great time already. I'm excited.
Just cutting loose. I'm super excited to have you here. Yeah. You and I, our stories just connected. We just got recently introduced by some mutual friends, but I feel like we should have met a lot sooner, being in the business, entrepreneurship,
for sure,
leadership, faith space. You're in the bodybuilding space. I jumped in there real briefly years ago.
Yeah.
But man, just love to hear your story of like we're jumping off, setting off 2024. You've got multiple businesses, a lot going on, lots of big goals, and you've gone through a lot, man. You've done hard things and overcome them.
For sure.
So love to hear about it, man.
Okay. Is there a particular place you'd like me to start? Personal story, business story? Yeah, like most folks, I'm sure I have more than one story to share. Is there one you want me to start with?
Just share your business story, man. Like what got you from, where you were to where you are with multiple successful businesses in two totally different industries.
Two very different industries. So for anyone listening, my wife and I, we own an online fitness and health coaching business. We also own a brick and mortar tanning and red light therapy salon in Windsor. And so two totally different avenues of business, one online, one brick and mortar. They do cater to maybe a subset of the health and fitness space. We like to use the expression like look good, feel good. So there is a little bit of overlap there, but by and large, when it comes down to it, the businesses are pretty different in how they operate and just the day-to-day course of business. But how I got into business is an offshoot of my personal story. I went to college, got a career job, did the thing for a long time, and then my mom actually got very sick. I was in California. I was working a defense contract for the Marine Corps. It's not as cool as it sounds. I was there doing geospatial technology. I was managing their mapping data. I wasn't like the badass hitman like in a foreign country or something like that. But I was working a defense contract for the Marine Corps. My mom got sick. She came down with a late-stage brain tumor, and it was one of those situations where the doctors thought it had been around for a long time. It was about the size of a mandarin orange inside her brain when they found it. But they're like, it's probably been here for a long time, and it's just now showing symptoms. And so, unfortunately, by the time they caught it, it was a little bit too late. And so the decision came down between my sister and myself of what do we do? What are our options? How do we best manage this? So I basically made the decision to move back to Colorado to be a full-time caregiver for my mom, do my best to maintain a full-time job, and put the time that I could into being a bodybuilder. I was still competing actively at the time, and I had a handful of online fitness coaching clients of my own, so I was starting this kind of fledgling fitness business. And so as things ran their course, I came to this crossroads after my mom had passed, and I said, okay, now what do I do? On paper, I have this fantastic job on paper. This was before remote work was popular and, everything. This was early 2017. And so I came to this crossroads and I said, what do I do with myself now? I'm living in my mom's house because she's no longer here. On paper, I have this fantastic job. I can live wherever, I can work wherever, as long as my project duties are taken care of. I'm checking the boxes. As long as my clients are happy, my projects are profitable. I was kind of, my job title was a consultant. And so, which is a very gray job title, but my responsibilities were a combination of analytics, project management, and business development, which also, in hindsight, pretty perfectly set me up for entrepreneurship, looking back. So I said, okay, I have this job, but I still dread waking up every morning, reporting to my laptop, checking in for Zoom calls, checking into essentially Slack, checking in with everybody in the business or in the company and doing the whole thing. And one of the pivotal moments in that time was I was on the phone with my boss at the time. And this whole business, this whole company that I worked for was very entrepreneurial in nature. It was a little company based out of Birmingham. They've since been acquired by a much bigger outfit. So it was a really cool entrepreneurship story for the original owner. He started this small business, scaled it up, sold it, was acquired by a larger company in the same space. It was a really cool story. But during the time, it was like, we had this conversation with my boss and he said, when I ask you about your project work, you're kind of like here, 5 out of 10. He's like, when I ask you about bodybuilding, when I ask you about your personal business, when I ask you about these other things, you immediately elevate to like a 9 out of 10. He's like, you're emphatic, your voice is excited. Like we're on Zoom, I can see you talking with your hands, all these things. He's like, you're just a whole different energy. Yeah. And he goes, I don't think you should ignore that. And
this is your boss at the company.
Yeah, this was my boss at the time. Okay. And so he tells me this and I was like, for real? He goes, yeah, for real. Oh shit. Okay. Well, I guess I hadn't ever really consciously become aware of that of myself. Like I just was.
You didn't know that till he told you.
Right. I wasn't aware of it until he told me that. And so 2 weeks later, I put in my 2 weeks notice and I was like, I'm going to pursue entrepreneurship full time. Here we go. Burning the boat, jumping in. We're doing this thing. So that's basically what I did. I went full time into entrepreneurship, into growing the fledgling coaching business. I returned to competing, and I was competing in bodybuilding kind of at that national level. So in bodybuilding, there's 3 levels of the sport. There's the local level. There's the shows in Denver. There used to be the one in Greeley, the Warrior, the one that you did a long time ago.
Yep.
And then once you qualify at that level, you go up into what they call the national level. Those are the professional qualifying shows. Those are all of basically the show winners of the local shows from all over the country. And then if you win there, you qualify to become a pro. So I went back to competing kind of in that middle tier and used that as a tool and as a platform to help grow my coaching business. And I was doing all the things that I needed to do. I was out on social media. I was, teaching posing classes for free at Armbrust Pro Gym in Denver, which has now grown to be almost a destination similar to the Gold's Gym in Venice Beach. It's become this bodybuilding destination for Colorado. And so I was kind of in the scene at the level that I needed to be. And I just put myself in the places. Anytime I got an opportunity to travel somewhere for a trade show, to talk to a company that was involved in the sport that, wanted, I wouldn't say endorsement because it wasn't sponsorship, but wanted to collaborate in some way. This was before paid promotion on Instagram was really becoming a thing. It was really only accessible to like the really top tier influencers. The word influencer was still really new at that point.
Yeah.
It hadn't been around super long in 2016, 2017, and it was only these really top tier accounts that were getting any sort of like paid promotion. But anyway, if there was an opportunity for me to get some free stuff, some free gear, some free apparel for, wearing it in posts and tagging the company or mentioning just little horse trade things like that. Mm-hmm. Anything I could do to start to create some traction for myself and help grow. And I was, posting the client transformations, doing all the things that I needed to do to start to get my legs up underneath me.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how it started was, it was one of the best things that I've ever done in my life, but it came from one of the worst experiences and lowest times of my life, having to be the full-time caregiver for my mom as she was passing of brain cancer. It kind of makes you starkly aware of the choices that you're making in life. And it makes you very, very acutely aware that, your time on earth is very finite, and what you do with it matters, and who you spend it with matters, and all of these things. And it definitely created an awareness of that for me. And it really readjusted my perspective on a lot of things, including what am I doing with my life? Where am I finding fulfillment and value? How do I want to show up, provide, do all these other things? And is what I'm doing now really the best for me?
So you make that huge choice to stay with mom, take care of mom. Mm-hmm. She passes. I'm sorry for your loss, man.
Appreciate it.
So you have this loss. You're grieving. You're working at a job that you don't realize you hate. Your boss tells you that. Yeah. It's like, hey man, you should go with the passion, and then you burn the boats. I know some entrepreneurs that they'll just little bits at a time until they can replace the income or half the income. You're like, nope, we're burning the boats.
We're going.
So with all that experience, like leading up to that, you jump into that space, the first day, first week, first month, what's going through your head? What would you tell an entrepreneur that maybe has that same backstory or same back situation? Like what was going on? It's got to be a lot of just emotion, challenge. And what do you do with all that?
Totally. And that's a great question. So, and I think my answer is twofold. First was I went all in, both feet. It wasn't like I'm going to take a big step in and leave one foot back here. I fully went in and I fully committed. But before I did, I also gave myself a really good gut check. I said, look, if I do this and I hose the entire thing up, what is my financial future going to look like? How does this play out for me long term? Because the other part to my personal story is I had been through the big mess up with money earlier in my life. I had accumulated tons of consumer debt, just bought into the whole, I'm going to have 5 credit cards and I'm going to load them up and I'm going to be house poor and car poor and payment poor on everything. And then when I was in the transition to the job going out to California, I got really behind on everything because there was a period of time where I didn't have any work. And so I had to kind of dig myself out of that hole as I was out in California. So that piece of it was very top of mind. And I said, okay, I know I'm the kind of person that doesn't do well with what you described of, I'm going to chip away at this little by little, and I'm going to slowly transition from one into the other. I know that I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to go, I have to go. Yep. But I also need to have this conversation with myself of if I go and if I fuck this up, then what? So that's what I did. The, I guess, silver lining to being in my mom's house was that it was very inexpensive. So my financial commitments were not that great. I had rid myself of the car payment. I had rid myself of the consumer debt. I had rid myself of all of these other things, carrying lessons that I had learned previously in my life into this. So I wasn't, the financial stakes for me weren't incredibly high. Yes, I still needed money to eat, to live, to pay for the bills that I did have, but they also weren't $5,000 a month in living expenses that I had to just immediately pick up, because I also didn't have a big safety net, a big savings to pull from. I was kind of operating on cash flow. So the upshot was because the bills weren't super high and living in Colorado wasn't quite as expensive at that point as it might be currently here in 2023, that played out, that was beneficial to me in that point, right? So more pointedly to answer the question, 1, I did the gut check, and 2, when I committed, I fully committed, and I was like, I'm doing this. I'm going to show up and I'm going to make the best. I'm going to check each day off as perfectly as I can, because that's something that bodybuilding will teach you. Is you show up and you make every day, you execute each day as perfectly as you can, and you just start to stack those one on top of another, on top of another, on top of another over time, very much like entrepreneurship. And I just leaned fully into that and have done my best just to do it since.
And I look at, so when I jumped into the, just the brief, did that physique show, I took a break from jiu-jitsu. I had some back injuries and I couldn't compete. And Ron Worley, if you know Ron,
yeah,
so you should go do a show. I'm like, all right, let's go do a show. We had like 14 weeks, 15 weeks when I decided to do it. But just the regimented, the structure, the science, the schedule, and you either hit it or you don't. And if you don't, like, you pay for it and you can see it.
Sure.
And I feel like there's a huge benefit and alignment to entrepreneurship. So it's almost like,
Very
do
much.
you think any and every entrepreneur should go train for just do a show or get on something, get into that space just to experience that? Because it was just this intensity of regimentness. That's a word. My wife wasn't digging it because of the food. She's like, why can't you just eat dinner? You're doing spray butter on your boiled chicken in your car. You look.
And that's a whole other point that you bring up. And it's something that we encounter frequently in our coaching business with our clients and their significant others and their families. Yeah. But to the question of, do I think that entrepreneurs maybe should go to the level of competing? Competing is in my opinion, is one of the best challenges you can set for yourself. It tests you physically, it tests you mentally, and it tests you over a period of time, just like entrepreneurship. I think it's uniquely positioned to challenge you in a similar way to the way that entrepreneurship does. Now, that said, competing is also not for everybody, because, they don't want to necessarily have to be that structured with their food and with, all of these things that come with the competing window specifically. But I do think that most entrepreneurs should have that element of self-investment and self-improvement and structure and consistency in their day-to-day, because that fundamental skill set is so valuable when you have to get up in the morning and you have to answer client messages or customer messages, emails, whatever, and then you have to shift gears, especially if you're still a solopreneur, and you have to shift gears to marketing, sales, and then you have to shift gears to back-end process and procedure and SOPs. And even if you're not the person doing those, even if you have teams doing those specific things, you have to at least have a working knowledge to be able to speak to those things with those teams to make sure that they're being done proficiently. You can't just be like, you guys do the marketing. I have no idea what's happening, but hopefully this turns out okay.
It works.
Yeah, you can't expect a very good result out of that.
A big shout out and thank you to one of our sponsors, M&D Painting and Roofing. M&D was actually founded by my wife, Emily, and I back in 2005. And for the last 2 decades, we've been here in Northern Colorado, of one of the leaders in residential and commercial repainting, as well as most recently installing residential roofs. So if you need to paint, re-roof, you got hit by a hailstorm, we can take care of whatever your home needs from top to bottom. You can find us on the web at mandepainting.com. Hey, just want to give a big shout out to one of our sponsors, Imprint Digital. If you're a small business owner, one of the things that you need to navigate to be successful is all things online and digital in terms of marketing and your messaging. Imprint Digital, they're the real deal. They are the professionals and they know this world inside and out. Make sure to visit their website at imprint-digital.com.
You might still get a good result. It might work out that way for you, but if you can't at least have the conversation about it, it's pretty hard to steer the ship. So, I do think that most entrepreneurs should have that fundamental layer of consistency, self-investment, whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's bodybuilding, whatever form it takes. I think that's really the important part.
We were talking offline a little bit just about the industry, just the kind of the behind the curtain. And I mean, I just remember when I did it, get on stage, I took 9th out of 10.
Okay.
In the division, it's a novice division, and then like 10 out of 10. I just got up and did it. I'd never done it before. But it was the best I ever looked. It was the worst I ever felt.
Yeah.
Didn't realize how crappy I'd feel. And it was it was an interesting difference in like behind the scene or off the mats culture. Because with jiu-jitsu, we go to a jiu-jitsu tournament, we're going to shake hands, bump knuckles. I'm going to try to choke you. We're going to try to finish each other, right? And like, I'm going to take this guy out. And then at the end, oh, bro, good. And your friends going to go have a beer. I didn't catch that back there. There was a lot of for me, like there's a lot of like trash talking and posturing. And is that a thing, or
it can be.
Maybe perceive? I had a guy come up to me, I've never seen you here before.
Sure. Well, it can. It certainly can be. I mean, there certainly can be. As with certain sports, there's going to be a level of ego involved, right? People want to be the best.
Yeah.
Problem. So to create a difference in perspective from a sport like jiu-jitsu to a sport like bodybuilding. Bodybuilding has more of a subjective component to it. You're being judged by a panel physically on how you look. Jiu-jitsu is very objective. If I stick you to the mat, I win.
Yep.
Right? Bodybuilding doesn't have that. So that kind of feeds into that negative component of ego sometimes, because especially as coaches and being involved in the industry for a long time, you hear a lot, somebody won't place how they want to, and they'll start to spout off about, oh, it's politics, or this person has that coach, and that coach knows the judges, and a whole myriad of things.
Right.
When at the end of the day, chances are you just weren't the best that day, and that's okay. Like, as a professional bodybuilder, when I tell other people, you graduate to the pros, you have done something few people will do. But you also have to understand, when you won to get here, that might be the last time you ever win, because you are now with the best in the world. That kind of honesty with people will kind of stop them, and they're like, oh shit, I never thought about that. But you have to check that ego. Otherwise, you're not going to last very long in the sport, because if you start showing up as a pro and everybody knows everybody and you're backstage spouting off about coaches and trash talking people, you start to become a not very good ambassador to the sport, so to speak, and just people won't like you. And if that makes that politics, I guess that is what it is. But if you're just the person that nobody like wants to be around backstage, and I'm not saying that was you in any stretch, but that does matter at some point, right? But coming back to your question, I think there's more of that subjective element to the sport of bodybuilding, and a lot of people get into that sport in the first place because there's something inside of them that is unsettled. They're coming out of a difficult time in their life, and that level of structure was beneficial to them, like myself. They were overweight, and they have hated how they looked in their own skin for a very long time. And so they're trying to, in some cases, overcompensate for that. They don't want to just like look good and have maybe like a six pack and show up looking good to the beach. They want to be like the other extreme end. Yeah. We've seen people that have struggled with drug and alcohol addiction, and it's a healthier output for that addictive type personality, because they can go and they can do these repetitive things, and it can kind of, to a degree, scratch the itch without the substance abuse piece. That draws in a certain percentage of people as well. So when people get into competitive bodybuilding, a lot of them are seeking refuge from a source of pain in their life, I guess is a good way to say it. Yeah. There aren't a whole lot of people that just show up into that sport. And there are some, I don't want to say that everybody's doing that, but the folks who are more prone to like coming up and shaking hands and fist bumps and like, giving you a hug backstage, they're going to be the ones that have probably been in the sport a little longer. They understand the difference between the subjective component and not, right? They're probably going to be a little bit more seasoned, not quite as new, and they've just got a whole different perspective on the sport.
Yeah, I love that. Now, what got you into it? When did you start? What's your journey?
Other really good question. So I was very much the person who was unhappy with myself when I started bodybuilding. I was in not the same job I was in when I lived in California working for the Marine Corps. I was working here in Colorado, but as a contractor for the oil and gas industry. I was doing oil and gas pipeline analysis on some stuff, still in that same geospatial technology world. And I probably should have said this earlier on the podcast, on the episode, but for anyone that doesn't know what geospatial technology is, that's basically you pick up your smartphone and you type in Starbucks on the Maps app on your phone, and then you hit the little take me there button. That's geospatial technology, and it's used in tons of different sectors. So I was using that type of technology in oil and gas, but I was living and working in very remote areas where a lot of oil and gas activity goes on. Yep. And so first job out of college, I was very, very active in college. I was a competitive rock climber. I would ski a ton. My job in college was at a ski shop. I was the guy down in the basement mounting bindings on skis and fixing the rock dings and repairing the edges and doing all the stuff. And then when I wasn't in class, I was skiing I was in Bozeman, Montana. So I was out in the mountains somewhere. I was very, very active. Got this job, which was a very stark contrast. I was living and working in remote areas. Food choices weren't very good. I was very sedentary. And it was just a whole lifestyle switch. And then you carry that out over time. I was heavy, not in a good way. I was fat, I was out of shape, I was sloppy, I was unhappy. My mental state wasn't very good. And I was like, I got to do something because this isn't me. I'm not enjoying this phase of my life. Like, I was making decent money at the time, but like I also previously mentioned, I was absorbing every penny that I earned with some sort of like consumer debt and just not managing it. Well, I was the young guy that was making good money and was spending it faster than I could earn it, and also not taking very good care of myself. So it was kind of one of those stories where I woke up one day not in a good place and just kind of looked in the mirror and was like, dude, you like have to get your shit together. Because this, whatever this,
fat bastard.
Yeah, whatever this is you got going on is not cutting it. Like the high of being like the kid right out of school who's making good money and he's like supervising some people who are like a few years older than him. Like that doesn't matter because you still wound up like this. Like you didn't do very well with whatever you thought this was, whoever you thought you were. Like you're not managing it very well. And you need to get your shit together, basically, and having that really transparent, honest conversation with myself. And so the very first thing I did was I actually ordered one of these like off the TV, like at home workout programs where you stand in the living room and the guy shouts at you off the TV and just like makes you move. Yep. That's where I started because my work schedule was so crazy. I was working pretty much 16 hours a day. My field crew was working 12s. That I was supervising, and then I had hours on either side of them that I had to work.
So sleep and work.
Sleep and work, yeah. But also on a oil and gas hitch type schedule. For anyone that's not familiar with that, most oil and gas guys will work like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, especially if they're out in the field. Ours was like that, but blown up. I would work 6 weeks on, 7 days a week, and then I would have 2 full weeks off. So we're talking like 16-hour days for 6 weeks straight, and then I'd have 2 full weeks off. And so I would have very limited energy, very limited time to just be active. And so that's where I started, in the living room with the dude shouting at me on the TV, getting reactive, getting all the soreness out of my joints from being fat and being sloppy and being sedentary, and started there. But that program also came with a little book about like, what are macronutrients and what is all this stuff? What are calories? Very high level information. But I started to also educate myself about food and understand energy balance better, at least as it relates to the body. And all these kinds of things. And we're talking, this is like 2013 at this point. And so that's really where I started, and then continued to educate myself and research and read research and peer-reviewed things and read textbooks and kind of educate myself. And then eventually I hired my first coach, who was a bodybuilding coach. And I learned a bunch through sort of like applied knowledge there. You know, this wasn't like I'm going to teach you everything you kind of know. This wasn't like a mentorship. This was very much coaching. It's like, here's your plan, follow it, check in with me in a week. You know, there wasn't a lot of like, there was mentorship, but not in the exact context of like, I'm going to educate you along the way. Like I could ask questions and he'd give me like yes or no answers. And if I would, you know, pose things, he would try to generally be helpful, but it was also pretty classically like old school bodybuilding coaching, like work harder, do more. Like we're not going to do tons of like educational exchange, mentorship, that kind of thing. But I learned a ton through that, because I did learn if I asked a question, I would get a yes or no answer pretty reliably. So then if I asked the right question, I could get the yes or no answer that I needed that would then put me on a road to understand what I needed to understand. Yeah. So I kind of figured out that if I could get the yes or no answer that I needed, then I could go on a path. And if I got to another spot where I wasn't sure if why we were doing was based on X, Y, Z, whatever, I wanted a point of understanding, I could ask another pretty much yes or no question. And then that would solve the fork in the road equation for me, and I could keep going and keep learning and keep educating and keep doing those things.
Before we fired up the live recording here, we were talking too just about the busy days of entrepreneurship and the stress and everything that's involved, right? And your bodybuilding, and you've got diets and all these things, and you're on a break per se right now, but ready to get back into the competing. Yeah. Because you had some gut issues and some things that came up. So you learned and you were educating me. I thought it was just really interesting. I'd never known about it.
Yeah.
But you said just a lot of the stress and everything that was going on with business kind of started taking a toll on your health, which manifested into some things. So I think for people listening, like there's just a lot of busy business owners, business leaders. They're active, they're doing something, but that stress just takes a toll.
It certainly does, man. That's no joke.
How did it hit you, and how are you working through that now?
So, for the busy entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, especially the folks that, like myself at one point, really bite down on like the hustle culture, no days off, like all that kind of thing, that works to a point. But when you see a guy like me out on social media and he's banging the drum of like, you've got to slow down at some point and allow your body to relax and readjust. That's really, really, really important. And most seasoned entrepreneurs, I think, would echo that message. Yes. That grind culture will get you off the ground. There is a season maybe where that's appropriate, but you can't sustain that indefinitely.
If your life or business are cluttered up with junk right now, then you've got to reach out to one of our sponsors, Hulk Addicts Hauling. Hulk Addicts can come out to your home or business to do anything from removing junk to appliances. Maybe you're demoing or doing construction on a property and you need it cleared out. Maybe you need a big dumpster dropped off that they can roll off later. Make sure to check them out at hulkaddictsjunk.com. They are serving all of Northern Colorado as well as up and down the Front Range. Hey, if you're a business owner and you need to do some renovation in your space or possibly build a building from the ground up, you have to connect with one of our sponsors, Mendel Construction. Mendel Construction is a commercial construction company that's been around since 1997, serving all of Colorado. They can do a small tenant finish all the way up to ground up construction of a new building for your business. Check them out at mendelandcompany.com. That's MENDEL and company.com. If you're a Christian small business owner and you live in Northern Colorado, you have to check out one of our sponsors, the Foundry Advisory. The Foundry is a Christian executive peer advising group that connects other business owners in the community to help you focus on your faith, your life, your leadership, and your business. Make sure to check them out at thefoundryadvisory.com.
And so with myself, so running two different businesses, trying to aggressively grow and scale them, having that same busy, stressed out kind of lifestyle that comes with that at times, or certainly in seasons, eventually over time, coupled with, training stress, because even though training is very, very good for you, if you're always pushing yourself physically as hard as you can, plus you've got mental and emotional stress from running businesses, and you're working 6.5 days a week, and you're really not taking any downtime, that accumulated fatigue and accumulated stress, manifests in the body in a variety of ways, one of which is that cortisol is very suppressive to the microbiome in your gut. And it's becoming more common knowledge now, but what a lot of folks haven't been taught, because it's relatively new information, is that like most of the serotonin that exists in your body that controls your mood, your appetite, all of these other things, most of that is made in your gut. It's not made up in your brain, it's made in your gut. And so as this microbiome, as these ratios of these good bacteria, these bad bacteria, whatever, especially the ratios of the good bacteria, start to get out of sync, your neurotransmitter production starts to get out of sync. Your digestion starts to get out of sync. Everything else that comes from that starts to get out of sync. And then again, you put that on a timeline and let it play out, and you wind up in a place like I did where your digestion sucks. You always feel bloated. A lot of folks will experience like GERD or acid reflux, or just they'll have gas and really just They're just not digesting well. They feel foggy in their head. They walk around with the big bags under their eyes and they feel like they can never really get caught up on energy. It's like, man, I was in bed for like 12 hours last night. Cool. But the last time you did that was 6 months ago. You're probably going to need a couple of those to feel better. One and done is not going to do the trick.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in that same boat. And so I worked with a colleague of mine to sort of diagnose and help process through some of these gut things. And we found out that these good bacteria, there are tests you can run that you can order to home and do some of these kinds of things. That my commensal bacteria, which is the fancy word for the good bacteria in your gut, my ratio, some were very low, some were very high. So we were working on correcting some of those, which makes your nutrient absorption better. It produces less gas in your GI, especially because, as carbohydrates digest, sometimes they will ferment, which creates gas and bubbles and all of these things. So if anyone's ever heard the term like a low FODMAP diet, that is fermentable carbohydrates that they don't ferment very well, or you eat very small quantities of carbohydrates that will ferment and produce gas while that gut microbiome is out of sync. And so by way of being careful about your diet and being exclusionary to a point, I'm not talking about like a keto diet or a paleo diet where you're like hacking entire food groups out. You're just being particular about the foods that you are eating. Like, for example, I eat lean proteins. I eat fish and chicken. I eat a lot of fruit. Pineapple and kiwi are very, very good for your gut. They have a lot of good enzymes in them. Okay. Healthy fats like olive oil, MCT oil, things like that. I've got a lot of that kind of stuff in my diet, but I still have some staples like rice, basic stuff, so that I'm still feeding my body properly, but with the addition of reduced stress, reduced training volume, reduced training frequency. I'm not pushing myself as hard, prioritizing some more of these self-care things, better rest, more days off, less intense training. And then we've also coupled that with some supplements that you can get from, they're sort of a step in between supplements you would buy at like a GNC, like protein powder and pre-workout and branched chain amino acids. Yep. They're sort of an intermediate step between those kind of supplements and like full-blown medication. They're what they call like practitioner type supplements. Usually you have to be like an RD or some sort of practitioner, functional medicine practitioner to get access to these kind of supplements, because they're kind of in this like middle tier. Okay. And they're very purpose specific. That's why they don't just like stock them at GNC, because the everyday person, one, isn't going to know what the hell they are, and two, they're not going to come buy them. And so anyway, we're using some of these kind of like middle tier of supplements to treat some of the gut dysbiosis. That's kind of the big word for it. There's a protein that's overactive in my GI, or was, that regulates the permeability of your small intestine. And if that permeability, if that protein is overactive, if it's overabundant, the permeability of your small intestine can become too great, and you can start leaking minuscule microscopic amounts of like digested food waste product like into the wall of your small intestine. They call that leaky gut. Okay. If you catch it early on, it's not the end of the world. You can address it. But if you were to let that go for years and for decades and so on, it can, as you would imagine, if you have digested food byproducts leaking out into your body cavity, that's not a good thing. No. On a long timeline. So, leaky gut doesn't have to be like a big deal. We caught it pretty early because I knew I was having all this digestive discomfort. Yeah. But so all of these kinds of things that we took a deep dive into were byproducts of sustained levels of stress in all context. And the word that when I speak with our clients about this, the word for that is allostatic load. And that if you were imagining a bucket sitting on the counter, you take the physical stress from your training, the perceived stress from your job, the perceived stress from running your business, the perceived stress that like having kids and being part of a family, and just all the things. You've got dog poop to pick up in the yard, and you just every little thing goes into that bucket. Your body doesn't know the difference whether you're stressed out about dog poop or your quarterly P&L. It doesn't know any different. It responds the exact same way. Yeah. And so,
well, it's been interesting as I'm reflecting back on everything we've talked about, just the combination of, your mental health and your diet and your exercise and how all these things play into feed business. And it's just this big cycle. And it's so easy. Like I remember when I started M&E back in 2005, right? It was like, had a lot to prove, just got fired, super broke. I'm going to go work. And I told Emily, I'm going to go work from sunup to sundown till we become millionaires. Like that was the thing. And it was grind. You know, I just took 11, 12 days off, did absolutely nothing from Christmas to New Year's. And like my body needed that. I could feel that we would sleep in I slept like crazy.
Yeah. You probably feel a lot better now without even realizing.
I do. Yeah. And I was listening to an Audible book and it said either you take a break or your body's going to find a way to take it for you. And I see that a lot with a lot of entrepreneurs. Like they don't do it. I've been there. And then boom, you get sick. Something starts hurting. Yep. So I think that's important. And we just live in a culture, especially now with social media, right? Because we didn't even get into that. But, you know, as we're doing all of this, you're scrolling and you're seeing the guy with the great video. He's got the great hook and solves your problem. And then he's got the system and the program. And then you start feeling bad because you're not, right? Like that's part of that,
right?
That business, but it's just overloading for people. What would be like top 3 to 5 things, you know, as we kind of wrap a lot of this part of the conversation up for busy business owners? You know, maybe they're not in the greatest health.
Sure.
You know, like what would those things be starting off 2024?
No, and that's great. And I'm probably not going to tell anybody anything that they don't already know. But if anything, I will remind them of this because we find that a lot too. It's like we don't say things to people that they don't already know at some level. Like this is not going to be new. But your proper nutrition is key. We run into a lot of busy folks that flat out just don't eat enough. They get busy. I forget to eat. Or the one that I really love is they will adopt intermittent fasting as a way to push all of their food to dinner time. And it's that, I do intermittent fasting. Well, really, it's just I don't eat at the end of the day because I get up and I get sucked into my phone. I start my day, whatever it is. And knowing that that's a thing has allowed me an avenue to justify my behavior. It's not an intentional intermittent fasting. It's just, this approach fits how I'm already doing things. So I'm going to adopt this and justify why I'm not taking better care of myself. Intermittent fasting can be a great tool when it's used appropriately. But the other side of that coin is it can also be used as a justification for just not eating enough.
And then they eat a large pizza for dinner.
Yep. Or then they're like, I'm just going to push everything off till dinner, and then I'm going to have a protein shake and a chicken salad and a whatever, and I'm going to massively undernourish my body.
Yeah.
So it's one or the other. You're right. They either get to dinner time and it's like full table spread, I'm just going to hose it all down, or it's I've been told I'm supposed to eat healthy and eat lighter, so I do that too on top of not eating very well or very often. So number one, fuel your body. Your body needs calories. It needs fuel. It needs sufficient good, healthy food. There's lots of good resources out there that can help with that. Number two, like we already talked about, is your sleep and your rest schedule. That's the other huge one that really frequently gets overlooked. Because again, it's that hustle culture, it's that grind. It's like, it's no days off. I'm going to burn the candle at both ends. And again, there's a time and a place where that could be appropriate, but long-term, it's not a solid play. And so I literally just made a post this morning about how important sleep is and some of the key benefits that it brings. Like your growth hormone production goes up overnight. When you sleep and you go into deep sleep and REM sleep, your nervous system switches into the parasympathetic state, which is commonly kind of coined as like rest and digest. You heal and you improve and your muscles grow and all this positive stuff goes on in your body when you're sleeping, not while you're at the gym.
Yes.
It's when you're sleeping. And if you never sleep, that stuff never happens. And number three is, I guess to say it is like being very self-aware and being very honest with yourself about the season of life that you're in. Because to the point that you made of, we all get on social media, we might compare and we buy into the things that we read, and all that being what it is. Like there's seasons of life. There's going to be growth seasons of your business, and there's going to be coast seasons of your business where you're just kind of maintaining, and maybe you're not pushing your sales, your marketing, your lead generation, your networking quite so hard, but you're refining your back end process and you're building the pylons up underneath the pier or up underneath the platform so that when you do push up again, you've got a more stable foundation, and that's okay too. Yeah. Like it's okay to recognize these seasons of where you're at, whether it's your business, whether it's your health, whether it's all these things. And to use myself as the example, like I would have loved to have, kept competing and all of these things as a bodybuilder. But after the creation of my first coaching business, not too much time later, I met my wife and we acquired our tanning salon. Mm-hmm. Well, that required a big change of season for me in my life. I had to learn. I didn't know a thing about tanning and red light therapy. I know that I had gone tanning coming into bodybuilding shows. I didn't know a thing about the equipment. I didn't know a thing about the business model. I didn't know a thing about the products that you put on your skin that make you more tan when you use the beds. I didn't know a thing about any of it. So that was a big change of season in my life that I had to say, okay, where I'm at now, what matters most? What's going to move the needle the farthest? And I need to invest energy into that rather than just trying to do everything and not doing very well at anything.
Yeah. And I think for entrepreneurs and leaders, knowing just when to step back or step away from something or just kill something.
Kill things entirely. Yeah. Let it die if it has to die sometimes.
We were talking offline. I mean, anybody that's listening to this that has a partnership, I think one of the biggest, I'm in a couple of partnerships, and one in particular is with our jiu-jitsu gym, you know? So I talked to Troy when we jumped in. I'm like, we're going to get married, right? All four of us. And he kind of looks at me. I go, man, we're like, you're married to your business partner and their spouse, and literally to the degree that those four people are aligned with the business vision. Like, where do we want to take this and why? And when that's not, like, it doesn't go where it needs to go. One person's too fast, one person's too slow, and it goes in opposite directions.
Yeah, one's going left, one's going right. I mean, if that ends up happening, and I've been in a similar state where I had a partnership that for a long time everything was great, and then it got to a point in the business where we just started kind of diverge a little bit on the vision and the direction. And you're right, it was the exact same way. It was like a 4-person. It was myself and another individual and our wives. And so you have a 4-person dynamic there. Everybody has to be married. And when that divergence starts, again, put it on a timeline, let it carry over time. It just gets wider over time. Yes. And the little things that maybe get pushed under the table that you're like, I don't want to have a con. Like, I don't want to talk about that right now. You brush it away, and the little things that maybe get swept away out of convenience or maybe something more important that needs to get talked about, those kind of start to build, and it just over time it can really strain things. And so that's another great example of being really transparent and honest with yourself about the season that you're in, what's going to move the needle the most, and where you truly need to go. And for risk of sounding kind of like woo-woo, something that I like to say to people is, listen to that inner voice that's inside of you. Yeah. Because the things that you're drawn to and the direction you want to go, there's a reason for that. And it's perfectly okay if you're drawn one way, and even if your business partner is drawn the other direction, maybe that's the time where you say, how do we divest amicably so that neither one of us, if we truly can't get on the same page and one of us is just kind of like playing nice to appease the other, how do we divest amicably so that you can pursue yours, I can pursue mine, and everybody's good at that point, right?
And those two people in relationships being, the important equation. But then I think you forget, like, look what was built here.
Yeah,
we have a business right now, built something really great, but it's not going to go past where it is right now.
In that state, you're right.
Fair to like this entity, this business, this story, like somebody else, whether it's one of us or none of us, and somebody else comes in and buys the whole thing, needs to take it to where it needs to go. Because I've seen a lot of great businesses that tank because you don't have those conversations that get swept under the rug. So I love that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's a good reminder.
Totally.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's very important too, because just like in your personal life, who you marry in your business is like the most important thing.
Yes.
In your life.
Yeah.
So
I love it. Well, man, you shared so much insight. It's a lot of fun having you.
Yeah.
We close every podcast the same way. When you came into the building, you grabbed color off the color wall, and we have everybody just close out with the statement they want to leave with the world when they leave it.
Yeah. So I grabbed a color. I don't know how to pronounce this color. Pantone, maybe. And And the reason that I grabbed this color is because the wall behind our front desk in our salon is almost this exact same color. And so looking at the options that were available out here, I was like, I'm going to pick that one for that reason. You know, it's a little nod to our salon. It's kind of like a deep teal green color. And, you know, to the question that was posed about like an expression that you want to leave for the end of the podcast, for people to like know you by, when you asked me that offline a while back, at first I was like, man, that's a really good question. And I was like, it's really deep, and it's kind of like you can really go down a rabbit hole with that if you want to. And it's a fantastic question for that reason. And I started to weigh and to ponder, what's the measure of a man, and what, you know, all of these things, right? Is it accomplishments and accolades? Is it wealth? Is it this? Is it that? And I went down this whole rabbit hole, and then I kind of stopped, and I was like, it's none of those things. It's impact and it's influence, and the means that you use those tools, or to the end that you use those tools to move towards, right? The level of impact and the level of influence in a positive way, that to me kind of summarizes the measure of a man. And so I boiled that down into the very simple phrase of leave it better than you found it. And I think that applies to businesses. I think that applies to relationships. I think that applies to homes that we live in. I think it applies to a myriad of things. If you operate from the foundation of leave things better than you found them, that's a pretty good place to be.
Justin Vetter, that's a wrap.
Matt, appreciate
Thanks,
you, man.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Hey, if you're a faith-based father and you have a son who is entering into adolescence and manhood, you've got to check out an experience that we have June 2024. It is the father-son hike of a lifetime on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. I'm going to be taking a group of men and their sons over to Spain to hike some of the most beautiful scenery through northern Spain on the Camino de Santiago. We're going to hike 6 days, 70 miles, 200,000 steps, and have completely disconnected, unplugged, uninterrupted time with our sons. We are going to grow and bond and deepen our relationships with our sons through some very intentionally curated adventures, challenges, and experiences. And we're going to do so in the company of other faith-based men who have the same desire to grow and deepen their story with their son. If you're interested in this adventure with us, go to mattshoup.com, click the Go to Spain button, and check out the father-son hike of a lifetime.